Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Florida-friendly landscaping educational program. Today, I invited my friend, Dr. William Lester, and partner in crime and work to share with us. This is a joint project here. I put this PowerPoint together using an old PowerPoint of his and kind of worked off of it. And then he agreed to do most of the talking on our topic today on micro-irrigation. So I would, with no further ado, like to introduce Dr. Bill Lester from Hernando County Extension. Thank you, Dr. Lester.
Oh, thank you. See, I get the easy part today. I just get to do the talking. I didn't have to make the PowerPoint. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. And we're going to be talking a little bit about micro-irrigation, what it is, how you can use it, why you would want to use it. And of course, at the very end, if you have any questions, if you go ahead and put them in the chat box, that way Lily can at least see them and we'll go ahead and answer all your questions. So let's go ahead and dive right into micro-irrigation here. So, like Lily said, this is a presentation between herself and me on a Florida-friendly landscaping program. And this does cover number 2, which is watering efficiently, which is a Florida-friendly landscape principle. And if you're wondering what exactly micro-irrigation is, it basically involves low pressure and low flow rate irrigation. Maybe you already have an in-ground irrigation system in your yard that runs automatically once a week to water your lawn and your trees and your bushes and your flowers and everything else in your yard. Micro-irrigation is something a little bit separate from that because it uses very low pressure and smaller amounts of water. It usually runs at 15 psi or pounds per square inch, which is the water pressure or less, and puts out 30 gallons per hour or less. The in-ground irrigation system that you may already have in your yard runs on, I believe it's 40 psi, which is the same water pressure as what your house is on when you turn on the faucet. If you have to have about 40 psi, otherwise, if there's a problem in the neighborhood or low pressure, the water just dribbles out. It doesn't come out like it should. Micro-irrigation is very, very easy to install. Don't think that you have to hire a contractor or start digging ditches or doing a lot of preparation work. Very, very easy to put in either on a very small scale or a very large scale. And micro-irrigation sits normally either above ground or on top of the mulch or just below the mulch. So like I said, this does not involve trenching or digging holes or having to bury the system. It lays on the surface and operates that way. So some different components of micro-irrigation are micro sprays. These are just little tiny spray heads that are going to water your plants, and you can position them exactly where you want them, which is really nice because now, let's say, for example, if you have a flower bed, you can position the spray heads to water just the plants. It's not watering the area between the plants. It's not watering the empty areas, the walkways. So all you're watering is your plants, and you're not watering the weeds anymore because your weeds don't need any extra water. They do just great on rainfall. And as I'm sure you've noticed, the weeds always seem to grow really, really well, no matter how much or how little water you put on them. So putting extra water on your weeds is only going to make them grow better, and I don't think any of us really want that. So microspray, you can position it so it just waters your plants right at the very base, just the roots of your plants. Some things that you want to keep in mind is you want to try to group the plants in your garden with the same watering needs. Certain plants need more water than other plants. A lot of plants, especially Florida native plants, tend to be very drought tolerant. They don't need a whole lot of extra watering, but other plants, different landscape plants might need more water. Some examples of plants that are very, very fussy with their water and need kind of the maximum amount of water would be azaleas, if you have them, because azalea root systems are very, very close to the surface and they dry out very quickly. So azaleas need extra water. Impatiens need extra water. They dry out very quickly. And even if you have impatiens in your yard in a flower bed, you may notice that by the end of the day, they're all starting to wilt and droop a little bit. That's because they need kind of a little extra watering. So you really don't want to mix impatiens and azaleas with native plants because native plants don't need nearly as much water. If you have them all mixed together, how on earth do you figure out how often to water them? Do you water them a lot because the azaleas need it? Do you water them very, very little, or maybe just during a drought because that's all the native plants need? So it really helps if you're able to group your plants together based on their watering needs. Micro sprays are very good for ground covers. These spray heads, if you're curious, if you go to any big box store, there's a lot of manufacturers of these and a lot of systems. You can get a whole box or a whole kit with the hosing that you need, and it has a number of different little spray heads already in the kit. They go 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 360 degrees. You have little drip emitters, you have spray emitters, you have sprayers to spray even further. So whatever you need to provide water for your flower bed, whatever it is that we're talking about growing, whether it's shrubs or flowers or vegetables, there's some kind of equipment that's already been designed and out there available for you. And they can be very, very easily moved around. If you have an in-ground irrigation system, one problem with that is over time, your plants grow, they get larger, they start blocking spray heads, maybe you remove some plants, you put some other plants in. The in-ground irrigation system is set. It's not easy to move. You're going to have to dig up pipes. You're going to have to move them. It involves cutting PVC and glue, and it's a lot of work. I've done it before. But micro-irrigation spray heads are really nice because they're very, very easily moved. Most of them, a little hard to tell from the picture here, are mounted on a little spike. You can pluck it out of the ground, move it over, pluck it out, move it over to provide water to exactly where you want it. Very, very easily moved and easy to work with. So what are some of your reasons why you want to use micro-irrigation? It uses a lot less water. In-ground irrigation systems use a lot of water. And I know that Lilly has had occasion to evaluate a lot of people's water bills. Sometimes people will contact the Hernando County Utilities Department and they say, my water bill went through the roof. There's something wrong with my irrigation system. What's wrong? And we'll go out and look at it. She can tell very quickly from your water bill whether you're irrigating or not, because it makes a huge difference in the amount of water you use per month. So obviously micro-irrigation, because it applies less water at a lower pressure and a slower rate, uses a lot less water. And that, if you're on Hernando County Utilities, is going to save you money because you're paying for your water. It's not free. If you're on a well, your water is kind of free. I mean, you do have to pay for the pump, and pumps break, and you're going to have to maintain it. There is cost involved, but you're not paying for the amount of water you use per month. But it's still going to use a lot less water, and that's a really good thing for all of us to get involved with and do. It does help to reduce plant diseases. One problem with an overhead irrigation system is you probably noticed the little spray heads pop up, the little shrub bubblers pop up, and it blows water all over everything. And watering all of your bushes and plants and shrubs and getting them totally soaking wet at night during the summer is a very, very bad thing from the standpoint of plant diseases, because that is absolutely perfect to encourage some kind of fungal leaf spot or other disease to start on your plants. And the constant watering and dripping and moving of water all over your plants just spreads those diseases from leaf to bush. And now you're going to be out there with a fungicide, or you're going to have other problems with your plants. Micro-irrigation is really good because all you're watering is just the base of the plant and the roots. You're not getting that foliage wet. And from a disease prevention standpoint, that's very, very good. Like I mentioned earlier, you're not watering the weeds, so that's always good. It's going to help. This won't eliminate weeds, but it's going to really not favor the weeds. You're not helping the weeds out anymore. Micro irrigation is exempt from our Hernando County watering restrictions. And if there's anybody watching this that lives in a county other than Hernando County, you probably have watering restrictions and yours are different from ours. They vary a lot from county to county and even from city to county to city. So you want to check with your local authorities. But here in Hernando County, there are watering restrictions. You're only allowed to water 1 day a week with your in-ground irrigation system. But micro irrigation is exempt from this. Like I said, these systems are very, very easy to install. They're very user-friendly. There's a lot of manufacturers out there, and they have a huge variety of different micro irrigation heads. As a little side point, there are companies that make homeowner equipment and packages. They also design equipment and spray heads and systems for commercial growers. So I know that if you are a commercial blueberry grower, there are companies that have specific spray heads and tubing and lines designed for blueberry growers with directions how to set it all up to provide ideal irrigation for blueberries if that's what you're growing. Same for blackberries, same for other different crops. So micro irrigation is not only used by homeowners, it's used by commercial growers also. And also it's not very expensive. I mean, you know, gosh, nothing is free nowadays and the prices on everything have gone up, but it is relatively low cost. And trust me, it's a lot less work than it is out there digging up your in-ground irrigation lines, figuring out where they are for starters, digging them up, digging trenches, moving pipes. That's a lot of work and a lot of effort, especially that this time of year when it's really hot outside also. So comparing micro with more traditional in-ground irrigation, micro is more precise. There are even systems set up where you run little tiny irrigation lines for potted plants and hanging baskets. So you can set up a large line and run little lines off of it. Let's say if you have a patio area with a lot of potted plants, hanging baskets, you can run an individual little irrigation line and spray head or drip head into each pot and water them all very easily. Turn the water on, set your timer, and then turn the water off, and boom, they're all watered. A lot easier than dragging around a garden hose or sprinkling can. They are very low flow, so they have generally a maximum flow of 30 gallons per hour, and a lot of them put down a lot less than 30 gallons per hour. They generally put down only a half a gallon a minute. Your in-ground irrigation heads can put down a lot more water than that. It does put the water right next to the plant, right by the roots, so it's not going to be getting the foliage wet and favoring diseases. You can cover a surprisingly large area. If you really want to get into it, you can set up a micro system that runs quite a few drip heads, and you can water a lot of hanging baskets, a lot of potted plants, a lot of in-ground garden bed areas also. But the traditional systems are designed to cover a very, very large area, just 100% completely covering the area. Unfortunately, it applies water to the foliage also. We always advise that people, if you have an in-ground irrigation system, you're allowed to water from 6 p.m. until 8 a.m. You want to set it to run as close to dawn as you can. If you water really early, now your plants are completely soaking wet, and they're going to be wet all night long while it's dark. And I saw on the news this morning, I think the low temperature tonight is only going to be about 80-ish. That's pretty warm, and it's 100% humidity.
Bill, I do have to interrupt you here.
Yes.
You are given your watering day, so you can water within that day. So you can water before 8 a.m. So if your day is Monday, you can start at midnight on Monday and water until 8, or you can choose Monday from 6 p.m. until midnight. You can't water from 6 p.m. until 8 a.m. That would be 2 different days.
So yes, you must check your calendar first and make sure that you are within your proper day for you to be able to water. But I know a lot of people set their sprinklers to run right after the sun goes down, or
Mhm.
like very early evening, and you really want to try to time it so that everything runs and finishes by 8 a.m. on your watering day. Because you want to water right before the sun comes up and dries the leaves off, because just keep in mind, wet leaves during the summer is a bad thing, no matter what you're trying to grow. Eventually, it's going to cause a problem with every plant. I know that by the end of summer, we have questions and we have people bringing in leaves off of everything they have growing in their yard. Every flower, every hedge bush, everything has some kind of leaf spot by the end of summer. And keeping the leaves wet all night long is just going to make it a lot worse. And an in-ground system, unfortunately, gets everything wet, leaves, roots, ground, and everything. And with your in-ground system, there's two different types of spray irrigation heads. The spray heads, the little ones that, like in the top picture here, that pop up and just spray. And then the rotors, which are the big ones that pop up and they move and they kind of spray over a large area. They go back and forth and run for a long time. They put out at least 3 gallons a minute. So obviously, if you're running a couple of rotors for an hour to water a large area of turf grass, and this putting out 3 gallons a minute, it adds up. That is a surprisingly large amount of water each time you irrigate. So if you keep your irrigation going year round, and you are allowed, if you want to water once a week, that would be 52 times a year. If you want to do that in Hernando County, you are allowed to. But if there's any way that you can cut back on that, because we've been getting plenty of rainfall, maybe it's the dead of winter and everything's dormant and not growing and doesn't need as much water, shutting it off as often as you can is definitely going to help your water bill and help with your water usage. But in-ground irrigation systems can apply and go through a lot of water. So drip emitters is a type of micro irrigation. And you can see on the picture here at the very top there, that's the main water line. And then off of that main water line, you could take a little, they call a spaghetti hose. It's a much smaller hose. And a drip emitter just pops on the end. And when this system is turned on, at the very, very end there, the water is just going to drip, 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 drip. And this works very, very well. You can position that drip emitter right at the base of a plant and water just the base. And it is low flow. It doesn't, this is one of the ones that applies generally a half a gallon per hour or so. I think that's about the lowest they go. So it doesn't apply a huge amount of water all at once, but you can position exactly where you want that water to go. This is the one that works very, very well for if you have a lot of plants that are growing in containers, maybe large decorative pots, hanging baskets. You can run that line up into a hanging basket and have it just drip inside the hanging basket. Works very, very well. And very, very easy way to water your plants. Like I said, a lot easier than having to drag a garden hose around and waste a lot of money. Bubblers are a little bit larger, and you can see from the picture, this sprinkler head attaches to the same little tiny line, but it doesn't drip in just one little spot. It spreads the water over a slightly larger area. And you can pick emitters like this to cover 360 degrees or 180 or 90. It can be very, very fine-tuned to put the water exactly where you want it. This is going to work better for a large container. If you have large decorative containers around your pool, around your patio, it could be used for containers or set at the base of a shrub. It's going to cover the entire root zone or root area for a shrub. This has generally the highest flow rate of all, but it's still going through very, very small amounts of water. Drip tubing is another type of micro irrigation, and you can use drip tubing, you can use soaker hoses. Drip tubing is just basically a long piece of irrigation line that has holes already punched into it, pre-spaced. So you can run, you see from the picture at the top here, You can run this along the base of a row of hedges or a row of plants, and it's going to water the area very, very close to where the hose is laying. A couple inches on either side is going to water pretty well. You can lay this on top of the mulch. You can bury it underneath the mulch. A lot of these lines, you can just get the line and you can pop the holes exactly where you want them. This works really well for annual bedding plants, especially if you have them planted in some kind of straight row. You can run the drip tubing or soaker hose right at the very, very base of all of them and very easily cover and irrigate just the row of plants without watering the walkways and areas in between them where weeds are trying to grow. Micro sprays, I've had systems like this before hooked up and they work really, really well. This is, and I can't remember the name of the manufacturer, this is a very commonly used one that you can find at any of the big box stores, online, a large lawn and garden center. And if you look at the very, very top, the little spray head is a little red contraption, and that pops on and off. And they make spray heads that spray in every pattern imaginable. Some of them are very, very focused. They're only spray for 45 degrees. Other ones cover a full 360 degrees. So when you have this set up, if you don't like the way it's spraying, you pop that head off, you pop another head on, and very, very adjustable and user-friendly for you to fine-tune the exact kind of system that you want that's going to work really well for you and for your plants. These are installed above the mulch, and you can see that this is attached to a spike that you can put in the ground. If you want to, you can push it in harder and make it even lower to the ground. They do, I think, have spikes that are taller, so if you need to adjust it because the plants are blocking it so that it's higher, you can do that. Like I said, very user-friendly and a lot of options available. This works very, very well in perennial gardens. If you have perennials growing and you just set up the irrigation, you're happy with the spray heads you have, where it's positioned, you could just basically set it and forget it. And then every time you run it, you're going to water just those plants. You turn it off. These can all be set on timers also, so they can be run automatically. You don't have to go out there and run it manually each time. Soaker hoses are very, very common and popular. What this is these soaker hoses are generally made out of recycled tires, and it's a hose that is designed to leak. And when you turn the water on, you'll see the water start to ooze out of it and drip and leak, maybe spray a little teeny tiny bit, and it puts the water down right below the hose and for a couple inches on either side. This is a good choice for if you have irregularly spaced plants, because you can run this hose and snake it, it bends. You can run it wherever you want, tuck it up next to this plant, tuck it up next to that plant, run it down along the row of hedges, very flexible. They are very durable, they're long lasting. They don't last forever if they're above the mulch and the sun shines on them. Everything that's plastic outdoors eventually breaks down from too much sunlight. They tend to be very inexpensive. You can install them above the soil and above the mulch. You can install them underneath the mulch, so it's right on top of the soil surface. They can clog, they do deteriorate, and let me warn you, a problem with this in Florida is we have very, very sandy soils. So this is going to water really, really well right below the hose and maybe 2 inches on either side. If you lived up north and you had a heavy clay soil, when you use soaker hoses, the water sinks a little bit and then spreads very well side to side. Here in Florida, with very sandy soil, water tends to go just straight through the sandy soil. So this is not going to water really far one side and the other. It's only going to water maybe 2-3 inches on either side of that hose. So depending on your exact situation, maybe a soaker hose is going to work really, really well. If you're trying to water plants that have a large root system and you need the water to go, let's say 6 inches on either side of that main line, you may want to look at a different choice. But soaker hoses are a definite choice. So something that a lot of people might see in their irrigation system right now is a shrub bubbler. And this is technically not considered micro irrigation or low flow. This is a specific type of sprinkler head that's used a lot with new home construction. So when they build your house and they put in all the shrubs, they put the palm tree out front, they put in the little oak tree out in your front yard, around the trees, what they'll do is they'll put a shrub bubbler head down that puts down a lot of water right at the base of that tree. Because right after a tree is planted, it needs a lot of regular irrigation to help it get established and root and become, a very healthy, well-growing palm tree or oak tree. What happens is over the, time goes by, and over the years, I know this happened at a house that I lived at. I think it was the last house we lived at. And the house was at least 10 years old, and it still had shrub bubblers that were put in when the house was first built. And I had a shrub bubbler at the base of a palm tree. 10 years down the road, that palm tree was well rooted, well established, very healthy. It did not need a ton of water anymore. So I took the shrub bubbler head off and capped it. You just get a little PVC cap to screw on the top, and now you don't have a sprinkler head at that point anymore. So if you have an existing irrigation system, you want to take a look. If you have shrub bubblers, you want to make the decision, does this plant still need a ton of water like it did when they first built the house and first installed the plant material, or does it not anymore? And capping them off can save a lot of water, but they are not considered low flow or micro irrigation. And they, like I said, they're very important when you first install a tree, but 10 years down the road, your tree does not need that much water anymore. After a number of years, once your tree is established, all of them, palm trees, oak trees, everything else, can get by just fine on natural rainfall, unless we're in the middle of a really, really long dry period or drought. Then you may have to add a little additional water to them. So, like I mentioned, this is a good little diagram here of your soil type and the type of different emitters. So looking at where we are, we're in Central Florida, we're in Hernando County, we have very, very sandy soil. So any kind of low flow irrigation you put down, whether it's a soaker hose, whether it's micro sprinkler head, when it sprays, the water is generally going to go straight down. If you lived up north at the other extreme and you had clay soil, wherever the micro irrigation goes, it spreads side to side, sometimes over a very large area before it goes down through the clay soil. So keep this in mind when you're deciding, do I want a micro irrigation sprinkler head for this plant? Do I want a soaker hose? Do I want a hose with little drippy emitters popped into it? These are all considerations you need to keep in mind. So design and installation, you can hook up, they have very small, very inexpensive battery operated timers that you can hook up on your outdoor garden hose and turn the water on. And then that timer is going to turn your micro irrigation on when it's supposed to, turn it off. If they're battery operated, remember batteries die. You're going to have to check it on a regular basis, make sure the battery's not dead. And if it is, replace it. They can be attached to an in-ground system with a low pressure valve. There are ways to retrofit your in-ground irrigation system to run at least a group of micro irrigation heads off of them. There are special low pressure valves and different PVC connections that you could put where you had a regular irrigation head. You put this new head on and you can run small lines off of it. You really want to avoid mixing irrigation heads and zones. So think about this. If you have an in-ground irrigation system in your yard, and let's say we're looking at zone number 1, and you have spray heads that came with the house and they pop up and spray, they put down a lot of water pretty quickly. Generally, they're only going to run for 15 minutes before they fully wetted the area that they're watering. Let's say you have the high pressure irrigation heads on the same zone. It pops up and it has to spray over a huge area of your front lawn and go back and forth and back and forth. They typically need to run for as long as 60 or 70 minutes to efficiently water that entire area. So let's say you put micro irrigation, you remove one of your spray heads in zone 1, you put micro irrigation in, and it needs to run for a different amount of time. How long do you set zone 1 to run for? Do you set it for 15 minutes? Do you set it for an hour? You can see that if you start mixing different heads in one zone, it becomes very confusing because they all have to run for different amounts of time, and you have to pick a time to run that whole zone. Obviously, if you pick 60 minutes, the spot where you have the micro irrigation or the pop-up spray head, now you've absolutely soaked the plants that are growing there, and they may develop root rot and die from too much water. So that's the reason why we always tell people, don't be mixing spray heads in one zone. Try to separate it by zone. Zone 1 is going to have the big irrigation heads that run for a long time. Zone 2 is going to have the spray heads. Zone 3 is going to have micro irrigation, ideally. So for installation, step 1 is always start with a plan. Don't be afraid to grab your yellow legal pad and a pencil and draw a diagram, start drawing pictures, figuring out where you're going to run your lines, where you need to position your heads, how many you need. That way you have your shopping list before you go to the store. You get it all in one trip. Save a little gas that way. Measure the yard or walk it off to get a ballpark idea of how much area you're trying to irrigate. Mark and draw out the location of the plants, and then purchase all the correct equipment. And a lot of times these kits, these do-it-yourself all-in-one kits, are going to have all the different pieces that you need. All these systems do require, or they're recommended to have a backflow device. That's something that screws directly onto the hose outlet on the outside of your house and keeps water from flowing back into your water system. So step 2 is you're gonna measure and choose the materials. If you drew your plan to scale, use it to estimate your materials. If you didn't, try to lay out an existing hose where your plants are gonna be. Mark on the hose where you want the micro. You can use a length of garden hose. You can use string to kind of measure things out, measure the distance between the marks. That way you're able to purchase all the materials. Things you're going to need is sections of hose, the faucet splitter. A lot of times it's really handy where your system hooks into your garden faucet to put a splitter there, because that way you can still have a line to just run your garden hose to wash your car, wash the dog, whatever else you may want to use. Faucet splitters are great. I have a bunch and I use them all the time. Look at and pick up the irrigation timer. Teflon tape is a very, very handy piece of plumber equipment. I always have it in the toolbox when I'm forced to do plumbing repairs around the house. And then mulch, and you should be all set. That should be everything that you need. A couple basic rules to remember here is measure everything twice. That way you only have to cut it once and you cut it correctly. Cut all your materials to length. Add the tubing, the hoses, connectors, splitters. You already have your diagram, so you know the different pieces and what order they go in. And that way you're able to pop everything together. Go ahead and turn the system on and turn the water on just a little bit. Start checking for leaks. You don't want to turn it off full blast and start popping connections and everything right at the very beginning. Turn it on, check for leaks. You can cover the tubing with mulch. It does help to protect it, especially if where you're putting it is in a very sunny area, because like I said, any kind of plastic in a very sunny area is going to break down and degrade faster. These materials are all designed to be used outdoors in the sun, but covering them with mulch is going to give them a little protection from the sun, and hopefully they're going to last a little bit longer. So maintenance, you do need to inspect these systems frequently. Keep in mind they're built with and designed with very small spray heads. So just a little piece of dirt or mulch or something gets in there, these heads can get plugged very, very easily. Fortunately, if they do get plugged, you can turn everything off, take the spray head off, clean it out, kind of take it apart. A lot of times, if there's a little something stuck in it, you can get it out with a pin or use a pair of tweezers to pull it out. So you can clean them very easily, but they do get plugged up on a fairly regular basis. If you're wondering whether things are working right or not, if you just go out there and look at the plants that they're watering and look at the soil, you're going to tell if you have a plugged sprinkler head or not. If you have a spot that's really dry, the plant's really dry, it's starting to wilt, it may be a plugged or broken or unattached sprinkler head. These things can be damaged by lawnmowers, weed whackers. Like I said, you got problems with just the head being clogged. Things break, things split. Believe it or not, and I've never had this problem, but I've been told this could be a problem. Rabbits will chew on the irrigation lines. You see a picture here, one that's chewed up because they're trying to get a drink of water. So hopefully none of you are going to have that problem, but it's possible. You always want to run the system on, just turn everything on and go out there and just look very, very closely. Look for leaks, look for plugged heads. It really helps if at the very, very end of your line, you have basically a cap at the end of the main water hose, and you're able to take that off and just flush the system out. Because that way, if there is any dirt in there, you're going to be able to flush it out very quickly. Just run it for a minute or two, flush everything out, put the cap back on, and that's going to help keep everything else cleaner inside of the hoses. And then if you ever do have something break and you have to replace it, always pick the same brand, the correct size. When you start mixing different brands and different sizes and different flow rates, especially for an in-ground irrigation system, it really throws things off. Now, the new head is not watering the same area that the old head did, and things aren't going to work as well as they did. So always be sure to use the same and correct replacement parts. And we have a lot of resources if you like more information on micro-irrigation. University of Florida has a lot of resources. Here's a number of links for some. And we want to mention some of our upcoming classes. What day is today? Today is August 10th. So this afternoon, if you're available, Lily is going to be live in person at Spring Hill Branch Library talking about rain gardens. Wednesday, August 17th, we're having a class, and I think I'm a part of this one also, for pretty darn invasive plants. That's another online class. We have a virtual class coming up looking at natural products for pest control. That's always a very, very popular topic, and that's so popular and important that we have two parts to that. Part two is going to be on Wednesday, August 31st. On Wednesday, September 21st, Turf Talk with Bernie. Bernie is one of our master gardeners and very knowledgeable with turf grass questions. If you have a question, save it up and ask him. And then Lily is going to have simple steps to follow Florida-friendly landscaping principles on Wednesday, September 28th. And we have lots of upcoming rain barrel workshops. Lily, don't know if you want to mention anything about them. You're the expert on that, so you know all the details.
We do have 2 a month generally. There will also be 2 in September. One of them is always an in-person class at your office at County Extension. So the next one will be next week at 10 a.m. The rain barrels are $65. That's our bulk cost. If you are a customer of Hernando County Utilities for your water, you will receive a $30 one-time credit on your water bill for coming to a workshop and purchasing a rain barrel. We have other opportunities. The second opportunity every month is always a virtual workshop at 6 in the evening. So on August 25th, that'll be happening. And how that works is the following day, there's a period of time over like a lunch hour between 11 and 1, where they would come to your office again to pick up the rain barrels for the workshop that they attended the evening before. Always the first step, if you want to attend a workshop, the very first step is emailing me to get more information. So always email me at LillyB@hernandocounty.us. In general, we have in the past, and we will in the future, I promise, the Hernando County Solid Waste Division offers compost bins, which are free to Hernando County residents. It's just that they are stuck. They are stuck in supply chain limbo at this moment. So as soon as we get them in, we're hoping for fall. And Dr. Lester helps teach those classes, and maybe we'll have some nice outdoor classes at the Master Gardener Nursery when we get those compost bins in. Generally, if you attend a rain barrel workshop, you're automatically on a waiting list for the compost bin, but you don't have to get a rain barrel. If you want a compost bin, again, email me and we can find out about, I can put you on the waiting list. We do have one comment in the chat. She's thanking us for presenting this online class, and she's in Southern Oregon and has taken this class in Zone 8. So we're always glad to help whoever we can. So thank you.
Yes,
Dr.
and
Lister.
micro-irrigation applies nationwide.
It does,
So
yes.
when I was talking about the soil type here in Central Florida, we're very, very sandy. So keep in mind, you may be very different than that. But micro-irrigation saving water is an important topic no matter where you live in the country.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it depends on how close, I guess, she is to the coast. But yeah, this is one of those classes where really it does apply to everyone. So thank you very much, Dr. Lester, for your expertise today and for presenting this for us. And like I said, if you would like to attend an in-person class, not from Oregon, unfortunately, but you can come to the Spring Hill Branch Library, and I'm going to talk about rain gardens. But if you are far away, that rain garden class is on Hernando County Government YouTube channel. Look that up, you'll find the exact same class, Hernando County Government YouTube, and many other classes as well. So thank you, Dr. Lester, and thank you everyone, and have a great Florida friendly week.